Welcome everyone. Welcome to Discovering Buddhism. My name's Alan. I'm here on behalf of Vajrayana Institute, and tonight we're presenting the third class on the spiritual teacher. I hope you're all well. Thanks for being there. Hope we can maintain our live stream for the whole session. So next week we start a new topic, the last one for the year. It's called Death and Rebirth, and that will run for 3 weeks. Only 3 because we run into Christmas and we need to finish a week before Christmas according to the Vajrayana Institute schedule. So it's 3 weeks, not 4 for this last module. Also, I've asked people to, if they could, to let me know if they want to be included. Hi Stacey, thank you. It's good to see people there. I'm updating the email list because I have quite a lot of people on it, and I think over time people have dropped out. So if you want to continue on for the next topic, Death and Rebirth, and also for the whole of next year, or as long as for the foreseeable future, just email me back between now and next week, and I'll make sure you're on the list and keep getting the notes. Okay, and for people who are new, I've just put as always, my name and email address in the chat column on the right-hand side there. Hopefully you can see it. As always, let's start with 5 minutes of mindfulness of breath practice. What we're doing now is just focusing on the breathing in the body. It's a way of calming the mind, giving the mind a very simple task, watching the breath, which is always there, and allows the busy mind to calm down and get in the mood for some Dharma practice, Dharma study, meditation. Okay, so get comfortable. You can be sitting down, could be lying, sitting on a cushion, or sitting on a chair, lying down. Main thing is that the back is straight. The idea is that if the body is completely relaxed, that helps the mind to relax. So just be comfortable. Okay, so we just begin by having a sense of letting the day go, the busy day we've had, whatever we've been doing. Time to look inwards, time to take care of our mind, to calm the mind. A moment to reflect on how fortunate we are to be able to come together like this and study the incredible teachings of the Buddha. We're doing our practice for the benefit to benefit our minds, and also by doing that, we benefit those around us. Ultimately, we want to become liberated, like the Buddha, and benefit all sentient beings, all living beings. Now we just come into the body and check we're comfortable, the spine straight, shoulders relaxed. Traditional posture for the hands of the right hand resting in the left, the thumbs just touching. The eyes can be closed or just gently open, gazing ahead. And we can focus first on the out breath As we breathe out, have a sense of breathing out all the tension in the body, all the busyness in the mind, letting it go. And then we just give all our attention to the movement of the body with the breath, the gentle rhythm of the breath in the body, resting the mind there. And while we're checking, we're on the breath, part of the mind is just spying, watching what we're doing. So it will notice when we've left the breath, we've been distracted. It's called introspection or alertness. And when we notice that the mind's wandered, as it usually does, we gently let it go, let that distraction go, patiently come back to the breath. We're staying with the breath, one breath at a time. just relax. Okay, so hopefully you've got the materials I sent yesterday, the notes as usual, and quite a few additional documents. So the first one is just the answers that the writers of the course suggest for the questions on the module. So a good extensive answers, and they kind of just in, 4 pages, sum up the topic quite well. So it's kind of a good revision sheet, that, the answer key, they call that. Then next one is, this is an internet link to a talk by Robert Thurman. Robert Thurman is a very senior Western teacher from America. He was one of the first, probably was the first Western person to be ordained by the Dalai Lama in probably early 70s. So he was a monk for many years, and then he disrobed and had a family, and then he started teaching at university, teaching Buddhist studies. He also has a degree in physics, I think it is. So a very learned man. He's set up, his Holiness asked him to set up Tibet House in New York, which is like a center of Buddhist culture and Buddhist studies. And so he's the head of that. And he also gives talks. He's written many books, Robert Thurman. And that particular talk, he's been to Australia several times, and his main teacher is the Dalai Lama. But that particular talk is good. It's probably about half an hour, and he's talking particularly about Buddhist teachers and the relationship of the student with the teacher. He has has his own vocabulary. He uses his own words to describe the Buddhist teachings, like things like the Buddha verse. He describes the Buddhahood, where all the Buddhas dwell, which is everywhere, as the Buddha verse. Another interesting word he uses is spiritual DNA, which is the word he used to describe karma. So karma, DNA, is what is like our imprint for our for this body, and we can pass that on to our children. So similarly, in a spiritual, non-physical way, our karma travels from the subtle mind of our previous life to this life, and from this life to the next life. Interesting concept. So yes, so that talk is quite an interesting one. And then the next one, the article from the Sydney Morning Herald, 2017, by Daniel Lesser, a journalist on Sergio Rinpoche, the so-called scandal of Sergio Rinpoche being accused of abusing some of his students, and the general reaction. So we'll come to that later on tonight. And then the last one is just a interview, transcript of an interview with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They don't actually say who the interviewer is, but I think it's a Westerner, and much of that interview is contained in the book, The Foundation of Buddhist Practice, which I've summarized some of the points on that first page of the notes, and a few points later on in the notes. So much of what he says there, well, not all of it, but some of it is in the notes. Terrific, a very, very good article. And very up to date. He's sort of really talking in terms of Westerners and how Buddhism is being received in the West in the last few decades, and some of the mistakes that are being made in this in the relationship between Westerners and teachers. Mistakes on both sides, from the teacher side and from the student side. So let's just move on and just look at some of these. So we're looking mainly at tonight as what happens if there's what are the problems that can come up between the teacher and the student, and what are some of the ways that we can avoid these by understanding the whole relationship to some extent. So this module is just to give students some idea of this very unusual relationship between student and teacher, a spiritual relationship, which there's nothing really like it in our Western upbringing. And it's different to our relationship with our lay teachers, our teachers from school and so on. So so His Holiness has sort of very carefully and very well analysed some of the problems. So the first thing he says that it's not new. There have been many situations in all Buddhist traditions, not just Tibetan, but including Tibetan, where the teachers have behaved badly, maybe have abused students, have taught for the wrong reasons, to gain money or status or sex. And we also know that it's not just in Buddhism, but also in other religions. So you're probably familiar with the Royal Commission into Institutional Sex Abuse, which has just been in the media for the last few years. So looking at abuse in Christian schools and other institutions, churches. So definitely we've certainly been accustomed to that being revealed. Fairly recently, I mean, maybe 30 years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, none of this could even be talked about. There was kind of a code of silence when religions were involved in any suggestion of misbehaviour. So it's in some ways it's good that this has come out. It creates more openness. And anyway, His Holiness says this is it's very wrong, and it does cause suffering on both sides. And he mentions that he's talking really only about his area, which is Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. He says because it's new to the West, Tibetan Buddhism has only been introduced to the West since 70s, and so this problem is new to the West. And there's no. He points out interestingly that there is no central organisation in Tibetan Buddhism that actually is controlling or screening or checking what teachers can and can't do. So I put a note there that FPMT, the organisation that runs this centre and all the centres around the world, headed by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they do have codes of conduct, quite strict ones, probably only the last 10 years or so, catching up. And the people in situations where they're teaching or in leadership positions on boards, centres and so on, they have to do a course. They have to study the abuse policies of the FPMT, and then they have to do an online course. So there are checks, and teachers who teach from, say, discovering Buddhism upwards, they are all approved by the Education Department, FPMT Central Office in America, and also Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our spiritual head he also approves teachers and also people who are in the high leadership positions. So in our organisations there is checks and also training, but as a general rule, there's no central overseeing body in the Tibetan tradition, overseeing the conduct of Tibetan teachers or Tibetan monks and nuns. But he says, as this religion permeates or becomes more widely practiced in the West, students will be able to better understand the role, and teachers, both Tibetan and non-Tibetan, will be able to understand their roles and the rules that apply. And he says, so as it is that both sides, both the student and the teacher, have a role, particularly so teachers have a responsibility to prevent things happening, improper things happening with students. And students also, His Holiness says, should, as much as they can, not go along with behaviour that their teacher is, which they seem to think, or which to them seems to be improper. So they don't have to actually, they can actually withdraw. We'll see what he suggests they do now, from now on. But so just for, probably many of you don't have a spiritual teacher at the moment. So for as for the whole topic, just take the advice and the teachings in terms of what would happen if you had a spiritual teacher, and for practicing where you visualize your spiritual teacher and so on when in the meditations, just visualize Shakyamuni Buddha. And so all this advice is to help find a spiritual teacher and to check out the behavior and what to do if things get uncomfortable. So His Holiness talks about how traditionally in Tibet, remember in Tibet where our Tibetan Buddhism came from, the traditions, most of the practice was done in monastic situations. Most of the lay people didn't actually practice, and we're also talking about probably traditionally India, where Buddhism started, where Shakyamuni Buddha was teaching. So some of the people who followed Buddha, and remember there's been many beings, great beings, who've practiced the Buddha's teachings and have become enlightened since Buddha taught in the last 2,500 years. Particularly in India during the time when India was under Buddhists, most people were Buddhist, and then when it spread to other countries and then to Tibet in around about the 7th century. And so historically there are many stories, if you read books, teachings and so on, where great masters exhibited strange behaviour. So they may not have always been exhibiting themselves, manifesting as monks. They could have been just like ordinary people, sitting around drinking. I think I mentioned last week, Talopa and Naropa. So these are two great masters in India, where Talopa was used to hang around the wharves where the fishermen brought in the catch, and used to, when the fishermen cleaned the fish, he would catch the bones and the entrail and cook them up and do obviously some very esoteric practices. And he was actually liberating the fish. And but it looked like he was just an old sort of homeless person begging for scraps from the fishermen. So these strange behaviours were there to benefit their particular situation. Like Naropa was told to go and find Talopa by one of his teachers and get teachings from him. So he did. He found Talopa. He followed him as his teacher and did everything obeyed all his instructions and became himself an enlightened being in that lifetime by following Talopa's instruction. So these great beings were manifesting this strange behavior for the benefit of a small group. And he says nowadays it's just not appropriate for people to do that. It just wouldn't fit the conditions of today's world. So those stories are good for us, for our devotion, and particularly the life story of Milarepa, a great yogi in Tibet. We can be inspired that these people, like Milarepa, he was just an ordinary person who committed incredible, shocking murders and so on. And then by meeting the correct teacher, the correct teaching, particularly Marpa, he became an enlightened being by following the Guru's instructions. In one lifetime, became enlightened. So this is probably unusual these days. Maybe it still happened, but I remember Lama Yeshe saying one time to his Western students, we new students, new people, don't try and do a Milarepa. It's not going to work for you Westerners. It's a good story, but not for us at the moment in our present condition. So the other thing sometimes heard is that the teachings on emptiness, remember there's two wings to the teachings, Buddhist teachings. One is about how things exist, the nature of the reality. That's the emptiness teachings. That's called the wisdom side of the teaching. And then the compassion wing is the other wing. So all the teachings of the Buddha can be sort of put into either one of those two baskets, wisdom and compassion. So the wisdom teachings say that our unenlightened view of the world is incorrect, where we see everything as being solidly existing. In fact, everything is dependent on causes, conditions, constantly changing, and there's no inherent existence. Everything is basically lacking an essence. So this is, for people who don't understand the teachings of emptiness, can actually wrongly believe that that just means that nothing matters. If nothing really exists, it doesn't matter what you do. So His Holiness says this is a very bad mistake, not to be drawn into that. And also the Tantric Teachings, we mentioned last couple of weeks that the Tantric path has different practices that are not consistent with the Sutrayana path, the non-tantric path, and so that can't be an excuse for unethical behaviour either. We need a master, a teacher, spiritual guide to practice Tantra, and so that's why it's we need to follow the advice of our teachers on the Tantric path. So the teachings, now some of the teachings by Lama Zopa Rinpoche and other teachers in the readings, you see this phrase that His Holiness mentions: see all actions of your spiritual teacher as perfect and follow your teacher's instructions exactly with complete devotion. So His Holiness says that's correct in certain situations, particularly where the guru-disciple relationship has been established and the practice is happening at the tantric level. So once that relationship has been established and there's trust between the guru and disciple, that could apply. But otherwise, it's something that we shouldn't take literally. And of course, when you read, if you have read the article about Sergio Rinpoche, where things went very badly for some students, they were following Sergio's teachings and example very exactly, but that sadly they were misled, or in their eyes they thought they were misled, and so things went very badly wrong. So if this happens, say once we have teaching, have a teacher, and we get uncomfortable with some of the teachings he's giving, some of the personal advice he gives to us, His Holiness says, just disengage. We can just step back. And I think this is really good advice, that there is a time where if we're told to always trust our inner Buddha nature, our wisdom, our inner wisdom. Remember that we're told one of the teachings of the Buddha himself was, don't follow everything I say just because I said it. Check it out. Think about it. Use your reasoning, your human brain, and think about it, contemplate, meditate on it, and decide for yourself. So this is excellent advice, particularly when there's some unease with what's happening with the teacher. So because we can't really be sure when we maybe have some uncomfortable experiences with the teacher, whether this is a manifestation of the teacher's enlightened mind, or whether he's actually really making mistakes and is actually has gone off the path. So this advice that we think about our own mind. We don't want to actually judge badly a teacher who may actually be a bodhisattva or a Buddha, a high being, because basically we're not enlightened beings. To make the most of the situation, we can take what we've had, which is some benefit. We've probably had some good teachings and so on, and then we can just step back and look at the relationship to see maybe what's happening with other people, but don't denounce. He's just quoting the Dalai Lama's advice, don't angrily denounce the person. If he benefited you in the past, it's appropriate to acknowledge and appreciate that, even though you don't follow him now. Okay, so take the essence and use the relationship to profit our spiritual practice, to make progress. So do think about our own spiritual progress rather than judging. I think it's really good advice. So it also applies to where Connie Miller, in her transcript, she gives some very practical advice. She says, if we do have a teacher and we ask a question, we should be prepared to follow the advice. If we ask a question, what practice to do and so on, we shouldn't ask that question unless we're prepared to follow the advice, and definitely don't go to another teacher and ask the same question. That's obviously very disrespectful. It means that we haven't actually asked the question of that first teacher with the correct mind of devotion, and we haven't probably done the stages of checking whether this person should be our teacher or not. We're probably looking for an answer that we agree with or that we want is easiest for us. The other good advice from Connie is to don't necessarily take the culture of the teacher. So I remember when I first started going to Tibetan Buddhist teachings in Sydney from a really good, excellent geshe, some people were actually starting to teach, because he spoke broken English, some of the Australian students were starting to use that broken English to talk to back to the teacher, and also to talk to each other, to sort of try and copy the teacher's broken English. I thought it was quite strange. And then also the thing of wearing the clothing, sort of becoming Tibetan in culture, and thinking that we have to actually like Tibetan music and dancing and so on. So His Holiness says, and also Connie Miller says, we don't have to take the personality, the mannerisms, and the culture of the teacher. We take the essence, which is what the teachings say, what the teacher's teaching, which is the Dharma. It's one of the three jewels of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So the Dharma is the path to enlightenment. So the other thing is to respect all teachers, and this, if we find that a particular religion, particularly Buddhism, seems to be, certainly for me, it seemed to make much more sense than the Christian teachings I'd got during my childhood and growing up, and my just hearing some of the teachings when I first started to go to Buddhist teachings in Sydney, and then to the teachings in Kopan in Nepal, just seemed to make so much more sense than anything I'd heard before. So if this doesn't mean that we say that everything we've heard before was complete rubbish, and we start criticizing the tradition we came from. His Holiness the Dalai Lama had always said, if you can, it's better to keep your own religion, because it's something that you've grown up with, it's become part of you. So if you've after checking and using your own inner wisdom, you decide to change religions, then it's okay, but don't just do that and start criticizing what religion you may have had before, or any other religion. So we're not trying to convert everybody to Buddhism. There's no proselytizing in Buddhism. Very much the culture, the tradition, the teachings are that when people are ready, and their mind's ready, they'll find a teacher, and they'll also come to the Buddhist teachings. So no trying to convert people. No one's ever trying to convert people in Buddhism. And so we can learn a huge amount from other traditions. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama always praised. He's actually written a book called Secular Ethics, where he's actually teaching the essence of Buddhist teaching, which has got so much in common with other spiritual traditions, Christianity, particularly the compassion teaching. So this secular ethics is very much a way of cutting through the barriers between religions and the trappings, and looking at the commonalities. Fantastic. It's ecumenical. So His Holiness is very much, and most teachers that I've come across in the Tibetan tradition have emphasized the importance of interfaith communication between other. The different sects in Tibetan Buddhism, there are 4 sects. So interfaith meetings and communication between the different sects, and also between different religions. Even in you've probably heard of this, the Great Stupa, the Stupa of Great Compassion, which is the Great Stupa of Compassion. Let me think, get the name wrong. The Great Stupa of Compassion down in Bendigo. That has a guard. They're still building it. The actual building has been finished, the external building, and now they're building the inside of the Great Stupa. They have put in a recommendation of Lama Yeshe, who inspired the whole idea of the stupa. We have a garden of interfaith, an interfaith garden where an area is set aside for every religion in the world. And so these small, not actually quite, it was quite a large area where each spiritual tradition has or is in the process of building a small temple or statue or whatever is suitable for that particular area. Wonderful. Now that will draw people from all religions, which is the whole idea of the Great Stupa. Okay, so just looking at the notes where we are, we're sort of in the middle of page 3. I'm just not sticking to the notes too much, but Connie Miller in her transcript has, quite a good few pages there, and I've just summarised them of advice on what to do if there's problems with the teacher or between the teacher and student. Just like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, she says, step back from the situation. You can stop going to the teachings. You could just take a break and think about the situation and watch what's happening. Remember that the reason you had this teacher is you took refuge. So the idea of refuge we'll deal with in more detail as a separate topic when we get to it in DB, Discovering Buddhism. But taking refuge means that we've taken a commitment to follow the Buddha's teachings in the form of the 3 jewels are called the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. So the Buddha is the historical Buddha who taught 2,500 years ago, whose teachings we're studying now, Lama Rim teachings, all the different levels of teaching. And it can also mean Buddhahood. So that could mean our Buddha potential inside. That's like the inner Buddha here, our own Buddha potential. And all those who are following the path, those who are on the path, the Bodhisattvas, who are great beings, highly realized beings of great compassion, and Buddhas who become enlightened. The Dharma is the teachings, the actual teachings, which is the written word, spoken word. And then the Sangha are those who are following the teachings. They could be ordained and non-ordained, people who are like-minded and who have adopted this teaching. So she also suggests that it is good not to just ignore the problem. Admit that there is a problem. The teacher is behaving in a way that the student doesn't like or doesn't understand, and it seems to go against what the student has learned of what's right and wrong. So look at it and perhaps ask questions and definitely contemplate what's going on, how our mind is reacting. Perhaps we were actually expecting too much, and the main thing is to react in a way that will benefit our mind and not harm our mind. Because this relationship with the teacher is so highly charged, it's a very powerful relationship, we should be careful, because positive actions towards the teacher can greatly benefit us, but a negative state of mind towards the teacher can actually harm our progress. So we also have to, she suggests, realize that the way we see things may not be the way things really are. They could be. The teacher may have definitely misbehaved, but it's also possible that as an unenlightened being, we may not be able to understand the behavior. So she says there's nothing wrong, and the Dalai Lama says, if we come to the conclusion that this teacher is going a way that we don't want to follow, just stop. We can forget that and take what we've learned and benefit from. There must have been some positive effect that teacher had on us. So we can actually take that and use that and move on. Perhaps find another teacher, but just move on and don't dwell. Don't dwell and don't openly criticize and keep going over the bad qualities of the teacher. That's very harmful. So the key, one of the words that comes up again and again is maintain respect. Maintain respect. Move on. Find someone. Just go somewhere else for teaching, and maintain respect. So probably now just mention Sergio Rinpoche, because my connection with Sergio Rinpoche was I met him and went to teachings during the 80s mainly, and perhaps the 90s. I'd already met Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, so I'd already really found the teachers that I wanted. And Lama Zopa is still my teacher. Lama Yeshe's passed away, of course. But I remember going to see Sergio Rinpoche. He's fantastically eloquent. He grew up he's not a monk. He's not ordained, but he's from a very high family in Tibet, who left Tibet before the Dalai Lama in the early 50s, went to live in India, and then Sergio Rinpoche, as a child, was sent to England to a very good school, went to Cambridge, I think it was, got a very high degree, and so he has perfect English, and is very, very skillful at relating to Westerners. And so he came to Sydney, yes, for probably about once a year or once every 2 years, and he used to teach at different locations, sometimes out in the country, and I used to, sometimes for a weekend, just go and enjoy the teaching. And I think I'd benefited a lot. He particularly did workshops on death and dying, and he wrote the book, the Tibetan book of living and dying. He particularly did workshops on death and dying, and he wrote the book, the Tibetan book of living and dying, which is I found very helpful. When it came out in the 90s, I think it was early 90s, it was probably one of the really few books written in a very easy style, perfect English, very almost poetic style, that was available in the West to understand the Tibetan view of death and how to help people when they're dying. And it's still, I think, to this day, very helpful and probably used by Western, by people in the, say, palliative care business and so on, and people who are looking after dying friends and relatives. Very useful. So to me, definitely I benefited. I didn't continue to go regularly. There were, of course, his people who regarded him as their guru, which I didn't, but he came regularly, and they started what they call the Rigpa Association, and they used to go and do workshops up in Myall Lakes area, north coast, and so he had quite a big following. He had some very, very high-powered business people who, amongst his followers. He gave workshops to big business. I think Qantas might have been one of them. The director of Woolworths, I think, was one of his students. So these people were very helped by him. And then, as you saw, if you read the article, 2017, some of his students wrote a letter, I think there are 8 of them, complaining about his behaviour. So the behaviour included violence, sexual misconduct, various different degrees of bullying and assault. These were his very close, not all his very close students, but some of them. And the letter was sent to the Dalai Lama and also to other high teachers. And of course, the press got hold of it, and it became quite a hot topic. And so this caused people to reconsider their relationship with him. It's worth reading the article carefully, because you'll see that the people who wrote the letter, there are 8 people who wrote the letter, for as many of those, there are probably more who actually said in response that they had actually never seen misconduct of the kind mentioned, and also that they had benefited greatly from Sergio Rinpoche's teachings. So this this response was worth looking at. So you can actually see that some people didn't know what was going on. So there were different reactions. So one of the things to look at, and I think I put this in the notes, is to just look at the media article and then put that against everything that you've read in this course, you've learned from this course, this particular topic, particularly Alex Berzin's his articles, and see how perhaps if you can imagine that happening to your teacher, if you had one, which way you would react. Very interesting situation to think about. So definitely that's a very vivid example of what can go wrong in the minds of some people. And I think even if it's my response is, I'm glad I'm not involved at that level, but I can appreciate what that teacher did in my sort of earlier days of studying Buddhism, and I could sort of know that he has helped other students who may not be his teacher anymore. So we can actually take what helps us and then move on, find other teachers and so on. So the thing is I think to not brood and not start to overthink it. I remember someone asked Lama Zopa once about what to do if there's some misconduct or something difficult. Don't think about it. He said, better think about it. Better not think about it. We've got other things to do. We've got lots of practices, teachings, meditations to do. We can move on, just continue our practice. Remember, we took refuge. We took refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That's still, no matter what conduct or misconducts happen, the Buddhist teachings are still there. That's the Dharma is there, and there are beings following the ethical practices, following the Four Noble Truths, and so on. But there's still practices. There's still a path that we can follow. So it's quite a difficult topic. As you can see, the spiritual teacher, and I think it's a work in progress. Just if we have a teacher, or many of us have more than one teacher, it's something. It's something that's happening. We need to nurture it, and something that can actually, like a garden, it can actually flourish and become more and more useful and more rich, and benefit us more and more as we understand the relationship, the spiritual teacher relationship. I would love to be able to ask for questions, because there's probably many, but sadly not in this particular medium. But we have just thought we'd do one more meditation on this. We need, because it's the last night of this topic. So you've got I think there are 6 meditations in the transcript. Some of them seem quite repetitive, but this one's called Devotion to One's Spiritual Teacher in Thought, which is the same topic, the same heading as the one, meditation number 5, but it's just a little bit different. I've called it number 2, part 2. So what this particular guided meditation is focusing on is recognizing that our mind as it is, as not being enlightened being, can not really clearly see the way of a great teacher. So if our teacher is highly realized, either a Buddha himself or Bodhisattva, or just someone who's got a lot more realizations than we do, then we're not necessarily going to be able to see that. So we sort of think that even if this person was the Buddha himself, we wouldn't, and the Buddha, we wouldn't be able to see him in what they call the Dharmakaya form. That's in like the form of just mind, Buddha mind. Then he would have to manifest as a human being, as he did in 2500 Shakyamuni Buddha. He manifested as a human being. And many people criticized him. They didn't see him as Buddha. They could see him as completely misguided. Not that there weren't that many, there are a lot of people following the Buddha, but there are many, many people alive who weren't the slightest bit interested and didn't see him as a Buddha. So it could be that we have to admit that there's the only way that a person who has high realizations can relate to us mortal, unenlightened beings, is to look like an ordinary person. They have to actually, well, they could look like a monk, but they have to actually be in a human body which ages, and to us look like they have mistake. They have flaws. So so this is what we're looking. We're looking at this. We're contemplating each of these points. So these, they call them Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. That these beings who are there to help us, they are entirely motivated by helping others. There's not any sort of action they do that is for their own benefit. So that itself is something that should lead us to trust them, because they're never going to do anything to harm us. Then the next thing to note is that if they are Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, they have this incredible mind that can actually see what each single person needs, the particular medicine, what sort of practices they should do, what their obstacles and delusions are, and the actual remedy for each of them. They have the perfect knowledge, perfect medicine. And so they also have perfect compassion and perfect power to transmit, to be able to tell us what we need to do. So this is the point where we just focus on these beings are only there. So that's what the Buddhas are there all the time. They never go off. They never have a day off. They're all there to help us non-stop. But our mind, of course, is unable to actually see them or appreciate that they're there. So we need to think that they are there all the time. Mind, of course, is unable to actually see them or appreciate that they're there. So we need to think that they are there all the time. So then we have to think, if they manifested as less than a human being, say an animal, some other being, we wouldn't be able to communicate with them. And if they've manifested as a higher being, as beings that are in what they call the God realm or the Diva realm, then we wouldn't be able to see them either. So they have to actually manifest as human beings with what they call ordinary aspect, Diva realm, then we wouldn't be able to see them either. So they have to actually manifest as human beings with what they call ordinary aspect, ordinary body. So all we're doing in this meditation is just thinking and allowing that each one of these propositions to settle into our mind. So we contemplate. And you'll see Lama Zopa actually wrote this meditation, which is very long. It's 4 pages, so we're just going to pick out the essence, a few phrases. And he suggests that at each sort of point, you repeat certain phrases for several minutes. So, of course, this is good to do in your own time, and you can pick out or maybe underline parts of that guided meditation that you're going to use in your particular practice. Okay, so let's, I'll just point out, Lama Zopa actually gives interesting stories. Even though it's a guided meditation, he actually just diverts to in a few places and gives interesting stories, legends and so on. So one of the ones that you might have seen if you've read it, page 70, there was in Tibet a teacher called Geshe Patowa who lived up in the mountains, and two of his disciples, students, came to visit him one day. They'd travelled a long way, walked a long way. So they're very tired. And then the teacher offered them cold tea. So one of the students, his reaction was, oh, how very considerate. The teachers noticed how hot and tired we are and offered a cool drink, a cold tea, to actually allow us to cool off. And then the other student took the complete opposite attitude and said how terrible it was that the teacher had could only offer cold tea after they'd come so far, and how quite a negative, very unhappy. And so he saw the shortcoming. He saw the teacher's behaviour, which is just neutral, really. You can. The teacher gave cold tea, so there was this option of seeing it in a positive way or the negative way. And the student who saw it in a negative way, we were told, his mind actually deteriorated, and he really, it had a very negative effect on him, on his progress in Buddhist, in his progress along the path to enlightenment. So let's we'll pick out just a few parts of this practice. So get comfortable. Hopefully we'll, I have a notice on the screen that says my connection is unstable, so it's possible that we are losing or have lost contact, but I'll continue on. And we'll probably make it a fairly, maybe 5 or 10 minutes meditation. So get comfortable. Now start by just coming into our breath, settling the body, making the body comfortable. Coming back to that breathing meditation we did at the beginning of the class, where we just watch the movement of the body with the breath. Nothing to change, nothing to judge. So we begin our meditation on devotion to a spiritual teacher in thought and mind. By first thinking that everything that appears to our mind is actually an hallucination. So many wrong concepts. The way we perceive the world, we see the impermanent as permanent. We have no knowledge of what will happen tomorrow, what will happen the next minute. There are many misguided thoughts we have. Very much under the influence of delusions and obscurations. mistaken thoughts, wrong concepts. Just accepting that as unenlightened beings, we are under the influence of ignorance and delusions. So the next step is to understand that our teacher could be a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, or if we don't have a teacher, our future teacher could be a Buddha himself or herself, or close to a Buddha, which is a Bodhisattva who's on the path to Buddhahood. And these high beings, these great beings, who could be our teachers or could become our teachers, have no thought of seeking their own happiness. Not for 1 second do they think of themselves. They only think of others and work for others, including ourselves, with the thought to benefit ourselves and all beings. So we pause now and think whether, if we have a teacher, the teacher could be a Bodhisattva or a Buddha. Or if we don't have a teacher, think of the qualities of living Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are now, right now, living and existing in the universe, trying to help us. Only concerned with our welfare. And numberless of these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas working for me now, they have these two, what they call types of merit, wisdom and compassion, the two types of merit. Unlimited compassion for all beings, unlimited wisdom, understanding how things exist, how we exist, how the world exists, including how our mind exists. They can see our state of mind, our delusions. They can see what we need to do to correct our delusions. They know what we need without any mistake. They have perfect knowledge of my own mind. They have omniscience, perfect power to relieve what methods, according to my own mind, will help me, and the minds of all beings, every sentient being. So this is admitting or contemplating that there are Buddha minds working now in the universe. Working, there are Buddha beings, Bodhisattva beings. All the Buddhas are guiding me even now, guiding me even in the present time, right now. Just contemplating that, staying with that for a minute. Now, the next step is, if these Buddhas really do need to help us, and if they can help us, they will have to manifest as ordinary human beings. Otherwise we won't see them. They have to manifest as with faults. My mind is not pure to actually see a Buddha in a pure form. I don't have the karma. I could only see beings in this human form. So that's how the Buddha beings have to manifest. They have to appear like a normal human being, suffering old age, sickness and death. So these incredibly kind beings, Buddhism Bodhisattvas, manifest in ordinary form according to my karma, to guide me, thinking how unbelievably kind they are to do this for us. So this ordinary aspect with mistakes is the only one that can guide me. Unbelievably kind, this teacher, or this future teacher, when I find my Guru, will be, thinking that this is how Buddhas are at the moment, even though we can't see them. So this teacher, if I have one, or this future teacher, whatever action they do, they will definitely be leading me to enlightenment. They could be giving me teachings, could be giving me initiations, transmissions, empowerment, leaving positive imprints on my mind, bringing me closer to enlightenment. So there's no question, by giving me refuge, giving me instructions, guidance, whatever they tell me, even scolding me, giving me gifts, this is to help me, support me, inspire me to practice Dharma and bring me to enlightenment. Everything I do is to bring me to enlightenment, to benefit me. So we can just conclude and dedicate, make the determination that if we have a Guru, we will see that Guru as our guide. And if we don't have a Guru, we look for a guide who will manifest in ordinary form, but be able to guide us to full enlightenment, having great compassion, great wisdom. So choose to the merit, positive imprints from this meditation, from tonight's practice, from all the practice we've done in the past, we'll do in the future. May we be able to meet a perfectly qualified Mahayana teacher, Guru, in our future lives or in this life. And may we always see them as enlightened beings. And may all our actions of body, speech and mind please the virtuous friend. May we fulfill their holy wishes completely. And then finally, just reading Lama Zopa's Rinpoche's special dedication for the pandemic. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all sickness without exception of all transmigrating beings never occur again. May all wars, sickness, famine, torture, poverty, economic problems in the world, or dangers of earth, water, fire, and wind be pacified immediately. May perfect peace and happiness prevail in everyone's hearts and lives. May the Buddha Dharma last a long time. May sentient beings in this world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Dedicating to that. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for being there. Great night. Very happy week. Stay well, and hope to see you next week, same time. A new topic, death and rebirth. Take care.